Okay. Thank you very much for doing this interview. I just want to ask you about what your first memories of music were.
My father was a pianist with the big band, and in the before the war, before World War II, he was playing piano behind singers at Lake Chautauqua, which is up in the western New York area. And he also played organ for the church when he was in his teens. And then after the war, he came back, married my mom on a blind date. Actually, before the war, he married my mom on a blind date. And when I mean, my brother and sister were born before me. In 1952, I was born, and Dad was driving a bus, but he played the piano all the time. My mother bought a piano on time for my dad. I still have the piano. And when you were growing up around a musician, you picked it up. I picked it up, and I sang in the choir and in church, and sang in choir in grade school and stuff. But in 1964, my dad was watching TV, and Ed Sullivan's show came on, and he called me into the den and said, "I think there's something on TV you might want to see." So I came in, sat down cross-legged on the floor to the black and white, and we were lucky he worked in an appliance store, so we had a TV, right? Before color, we had a TV and we had a hi-fi. And the Beatles came on, and that's all. I mean, I just wanted to be in a band playing electric guitar. It's all I could think about. And at the time I was 11. So that was kind of 12, actually. So 12, yeah. I was hooked. I just had to be in a band. So I worked really hard at piano lessons. Were kind of, okay, that's past. I've taken 2 years of classical piano. That's all I needed to, so I could read. And then Mom and Dad were very supportive of me wanting to be one of the guys, be in a band. And they didn't see anything wrong with that. And they encouraged me a lot. And eventually I had an acoustic guitar that I got, cheap acoustic guitar that I got with what we call redemption stamps, which you would get from buying groceries or petrol, and pasted them in a book, and took 4 books into the Redemption Center, and they offered an air rifle. No, I don't think so. A pony, which that was out of my price range. And I had ponies at the ranch anyway. And I got myself a guitar, and I started learning how to play it. And then within a year or so, my dad said, "You're getting pretty good. I'm going to get you a better guitar." So he got me a better acoustic guitar, which was a Goya, a Swedish guitar, very nice nylon string, but it had a really wide neck, and couldn't exactly get around the wide neck. So I ended up selling it for $125 to a friend, and I bought a Les Paul Jr. from a friend of mine for $125, and that was the beginning of the rock and roll, the Carla Olson rock and roll story. So,
What would you start playing at first on the Les Paul? Or sorry, what did you say it was not a Les Paul?
yeah,
Yeah, Les
I
Paul.
was playing folk music on the folk guitars, because you couldn't
Yeah,
play a rock and roll progression on those guitars. But I was hanging around with a bunch of guys that were heavy time into the Yardbirds.
yeah.
And the Yardbirds were just starting to happen. I mean, still Eric Clapton was in the band, and they were way. Uh, my influence was following what they liked, and they liked the Yardbirds. They liked eventually, obviously, Cream, which came after Jimi Hendrix, and I really liked American blues. BB King. BB King played in Austin all the time. Freddie King played in Austin all the time. Those were the bands that were coming around to some of the what we call the psychedelic clubs that was part of the Chitlin circuit. And I really wanted to learn how to play like BB. And a couple of the guys used to call me BB Carla because I had that, I had the BB King So, and then it just grew. I mean, I grew fonder and fonder of playing loud through an amp. And my sister helped me get a little loan for my first electric, uh, amp, which was not something collectible at that time. And but it was loud. Yeah, go and compete with the guys. It was really cool. And
Yeah,
then
how you
a
going?
couple years
Continue.
later, I thought, this isn't loud enough. I think I'm gonna get a Marshall stack. So I ordered a red Marshall stack from the music store, and everybody's going, "You want a red one?" And I went, "Yeah, I mean, black everybody has. I want a red one." So that was kind of where it goes.
Do you think that your Texan upbringing helped bring out that kind of like slightly kind of let's go for it, just all out, go for it? Because I imagine it wasn't easy as a, maybe I'm not wrong, but as a woman, maybe in that kind of scene, do you think, did you have that ever, was that ever an
Well,
issue for you, or you just power ahead?
back then it wasn't such a case of being discriminated against. It was just like, okay. It was sort of like Bill Wyman, where Bill had this great equipment and a van. That's why the Stones got him in the band, because oh yeah,
Yeah,
he's got a
okay.
great, he's got equipment and a van. And it was like, she's got a Marshall stack. Let's ask her in the band. So no, I never had any problem with that. But there weren't that many women in Austin at that time that were doing. A lot of them were singers, and I wasn't a great singer at the time. So I wanted to set myself apart from that by playing guitar and singing backgrounds. I wasn't trying to be the focal point, but when you're standing up there in leather pants and your poor boy, as we used to call him, the little 3-button Henley shirts, and trying to be one of the guys, I just fell into it. And the guys that I played with, there were one or two girls that were playing, but not so much. I mean, a few years later, probably a lot of years later, I mean, I was in several bands in high school. And one of the guys I went to high school with borrowed my amp for a recording session, because his amp was in the shop was Eric Johnson, the guitar player, Eric Johnson. And we're good friends. We're still good friends. And he's probably one of the best, I mean, arguably one of the best guitar players in the world. So
I
you
try and
can
learning
you can
lifted
take that
over.
you can take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
But I mean, I might be partial to it. But and I mean, you just you just do your homework, and you don't end up embarrassing yourself, and you kind of get accepted. That's kind of where I feel like it. My strength was I'm kind of bullheaded. And I got in a couple bands, and just one band I was in that was like, I think we played 4 sets, 45-minute sets, of nothing after 1970. So you got the whole British invasion, you got the whole American, the Byrds, the Buffalo Springfield, bands like that. And we used to get hired for pretty good money. In retrospect, it's more money than I would probably be making in LA right now per gig. Um, but it was we were quite we did the Animals and Kinks, and as I said, Yardbirds, the Who, that kind of stuff. So big money was $400 for 4 sets at that point.
yeah,
Now I'm
that
thinking
sounds
about
pretty.
I'm thinking now $400, it sounds pretty attractive.
Yeah, but that's also pre all the inflation, so you're it's probably a lot more now, you know.
Yeah.
Um, do you think that were you always into American blues, or did you rediscover it through like the Yardbirds and Clapton? Did they make you realize it more, or did you always into it?
Well, I had a guitar teacher who was a heavily influenced by Freddie, BB King, um, and was sort of he was sort of anti-British British blues. I don't want to embarrass him by saying that, but he thought that that's kind of hogwash. The British blues was no good, and I was going, no, 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 it's good. I mean, he goes, nah, you got to learn how to play Freddie King. And so he used to come over after college. I was still in high school. He used to come over and sit on the couch, and we'd play guitars and no amps, but just play guitars. And he would show me all these great Freddie King instrumentals like Hideaway, and that's I mean, that's where Eric Clapton got it, was from the Freddie King and BB King. So I was always into it, yeah. But you got to remember, we're sitting right smack dab in the middle of all the bands would come through town. Now Austin was the highly on the Chitlin circuit. I mean, there were people. Well, there were integrated clubs, shall I just put it nicely. There were integrated clubs in Austin because it was a college town, a little more liberal than Dallas or Houston had clubs, but they weren't integrated yet. Blacks went to black clubs, whites went to white clubs. And I was real lucky. I had a couple of friends, and we would go to some of the black clubs over on the east side in Austin and sneak in the side door of the alley, and they would put us chairs by the door, by the exit, in case anything happened that was rough. There wouldn't be these, two or three white high school kids in a club where there's trouble. They didn't want that. But we got a chance to see some really great music. So
was there any
that's
like,
my lesson.
was there any difficulty at the time in terms of playing black music, like integrating it into it, or had that kind of stage passed a bit?
Not really. Not in Austin, though. And at that point I wasn't playing. I mean, I was still in high school, so I wasn't driving or wasn't going to out of town gigs or any of that. Austin was chock full of places to, little haunts to play, and little high school type gatherings, we would call. Sometimes you'd go to the CYO dances. I was friends with Donnie Erickson, who was Rocky Erickson's brother, one of his little brothers. And Donnie used to play the CYO dances, which was EYO. They were Episcopal Youth Organization dances. And he would do Stone songs, the Yardbirds, stuff like that. And I used to hang out with them. He passed away a number of years ago, but he was a great guitar player. And his favorite guitar player was Albert King. He was an Albert King fan, And, there were all kinds of other, backyard parties. People would hire you to come and play. And if you were in high school, it was even better because it meant that all your friends would show up, So that's kind of, Austin was really, I would call an oasis in Texas, a liberal oasis. It still is, most of the other towns, Houston, San Antonio tends to be a bit more liberal because there's 5 military installations there. So you get a lot of people that are coming through from other towns, from other countries, that kind of thing. So, and the University of Texas is there, and there was a lot of activity around the campus, a lot of things going on. I learned how to fingerpick at the Students for Democratic Society, which were the what I would call the draft dodgers of Austin. It's like all those guys were the guys that got out of the war, Vietnam War, on a 1Y, or what we call the 4F back then. It was 1Y. They had a mental issue or something, they wouldn't get drafted. So my brother was one that didn't get drafted because he did not want to go and shoot people, and he ended up going overseas and spending the next part of his life in Rome studying acting. And luckily he was not, the war ended before he was he had to come home. So yeah, tough deal. But
what about
go ahead.
what about I find the kind of different phases that your music took quite interesting, because you seem to have like different almost like I don't want to pigeonhole you, but like almost different sounds, different genres that you hit very well, but they seem to kind of come a bit later. So you kind of I think it's like a punk phase in the early kind of part of your career. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's a lot more kind of maybe a bit more aggressive, a bit more rocky, and then you went a bit more slightly a bit more to the folk spectrum of things. I don't know if that's a fair assessment or if you'd agree with that, but I just wonder where those different energies came from because you said you into rock, but then the kind of more folk singer songwriter type of things that you did, where was that always developing, or or how did that come about?
Well, I think it was a reprise of that when I met Gene Clark, because when I was growing up, there were the radio station in Austin, which was what we called top 40. They only played singles. They did not play album cuts at that point, and they played everything from movie soundtrack songs to the Zombies to the Yardbirds or to the Beach Boys, or it was a station called KNOW, and that's what we all listened to. There wasn't really another station other than Hispanic station that played conjunto music. And I think that the what I would say maybe from 65 till 1967, there were all these bands that were what I would call remedial players, but they were good writers, good songwriters, and they were also just wanted to rock out. We had an influx of those. There was a band called the Zachary Thacks, and they were heavily influenced by the Yardbirds. They actually toured. They did some show dates with the Yardbirds, opening for them, and they were it was it was kind of punk, yeah, kind of
Hmm.
early, what I would say punk in the sense that there weren't great players. They weren't like studied players. Um, they weren't college people. They were kids that were garage bands. We called them garage bands, and that was we kind of hung around with those guys a lot. And there were quite a few famous people that came out of that, like ZZ Top. That they were a garage band before. They were called the Moving Sidewalks, and they ended up opening for some shows for Jimi Hendrix. Because they wanted uh, Jimmy's management. They wanted people that would bring the local kids because they weren't sure how much of an audience that they were going to have. And I saw Jimmy 3 times in in,
Well,
in San Antonio. Yeah, yeah. And the opening bands were the Moving Sidewalks, and then a couple of other local acts that were kind of hip. And the there were what I would say the resurgence of folk music came about when the Byrds, who were kind of guys they were kind of accomplished musicians, like Roger McGuinn certainly was, but and Gene Clark was an incredible poet. And I find it unusual or interesting that he didn't have books. He didn't read books for that poetry. I don't know what muse he called up, but somewhere inside of him he had this incredible knack for poetry. And I bought their albums. The very first Byrds album, Tambourine Man, I bought that brand new when it came out from the Columbia Record Club, which was later became CBS Records. But Columbia Record Club had you could buy, I don't know, 10 albums for $10 or something like that, and they send you a little record rack you can put them in, an album, right? And that's when I started being aware that rock and roll and folk, which I had learned my cut my teeth on playing Joan Baez and Bob Dylan songs, and certainly Peter Paul and Mary. Uh, I I came back to that, and I realized there was a tie-in with them taking was what I would consider parlor music in a way. I mean, folk music was before it got topical. It was kind of like stuff you like skiffle in a way, for the Brits. It was just sort of like something you'd play at a party or something. And then when I later on in life, when I was in LA and had played in my band, the Textones, and we were doing our first record, actually a little before our first record, our first album. We had a 3-song EP that came out on Chiswick Records, Chiswick, that was an unreleased Tom Petty song, and then 2 other songs, one song that I had written, and then Kathy Valentine had written a song called Vacation, which was on the Go-Go's second album. And we were just doing clubs and everything in LA. And I had met Gene Clark at a gig. I went to a gig that his band was playing. He had a band called the Firebirds at one point. After the Byrds he'd left the Byrds and decided he wanted to go off on his own, and he played with other entities like the Dillard and Clark. You're a Gene Clark fan, so you know who Dillard and Clark is. And certainly in as far as Gene's solo career, he ended up needing management, and my manager was a huge fan of his. We went to see him play at a club that was, I mean, there were maybe 30 people there. And they didn't really have, it was not exactly his perfect venue for him. It was college kids, and they didn't know who Gene Clark was. At that time, we're talking 1983, 1984. And so we ended up, my manager, my husband now still, ended up managing Gene and trying to get him, record deal. And he ended up singing on my first album. And I'd go over to his house with Saul Davis, my husband manager, and he wasn't my husband then, he's my husband now. We would go, and I would sit there while they did business. And every once in a while, Gene would pull out his guitar and we would start singing together. And that's how that album became, the So Rebellious a Lover album came about, was that we were singing and it sounded really good. And he was having fun, he liked singing with me. And I loved singing with him because I learned a tremendous amount about how not to sing too loud, and how to, work a microphone and that kind of stuff. Whereas in a band, you're just trying to be heard, it's like, let's make sure they can hear me. And that's not what Gene was about. Gene was about singing to the guy on the top row or the woman on the top row, rather than, he wanted to help me learn that. And he was very giving, very kind. And that's kind of how I ended up with, like I said, the reprise of acoustic music. We did an acoustic album. It's all acoustic instruments on that. There's no electric instruments on it.
So how did you make the move from then, as you were saying, like you have to change the way that you perform? How did that process begin from you, from sort of going from rock then into maybe a more, because it's also more intense for you performing, obviously, because you don't have a sort of volume shield there kind of like protecting you?
Well, it's not really a crutch to be in a band. It's a different experience to be playing with 2 guitars, bass drums, and a sax. That's a deal. I mean, it's like a Springsteen kind of setup in a way. And at the time, Tom Petty was starting to happen, and that worked for me. I mean, that was my template to for the band the Texans. When Kathy left and joined the Go-Go's, I was sort of on my own. We were carried on 3-piece for a while, and then I added another guitar player and another instrument, a saxophone player, and we were still trying to get a record deal, still trying to get to play clubs in LA. And they call me the female Tom Petty, so what I can, my Tom Petty impersonation. But and Tom was really, I mean, he was happening big time. And what I would say, the transition for me was going from, I was never a great acoustic player. It was sort of hard for me to play acoustic guitar. As I was saying, I had small hands. They didn't make acoustic guitars that were really great, nice, small necks. So when I started playing electric, that became my crutch. in a way, because it was easier to play electric. And you really, it was, you didn't have to hit it so hard. You didn't have to, I mean, it's making a statement, right? When you play acoustic guitar, you can hear a pin drop
Hmm.
most of the time in some of these places. And when Gene and I used to play, um, Gene liked to throw a key at you that you weren't really familiar with. So I invested in a capo at that point, and I realized there were times where Gene would be playing in A minor, and it didn't exactly sound for both good for both of us to be playing in A minor. So I'd put a capo on it, and I'd be playing in a different inversion. So all I can say is I learned a tremendous amount from him about not singing too um, forcefully, to try to find the quiet space that people, intimate space that people would like to come and see you perform. And the be honest with you, we didn't get any really big venues. We played little places, and that was the way it was. I mean, if Gene had not passed away so young, we might have been able to have gone and done a big tour somewhere, but it's it didn't work out that way. And the time that I spent with him is very precious to me.
And how did the songwriting come about? I know you mentioned a little bit, but I'd love to know more about it. Was it just sort of like a organic process where he'd write something and you'd just bounce off each other, or how did it go?
The songs we did on that first album were mostly songs that Gene had written either by himself, or one song, Delgado, he wrote with his younger brother Rick Clark. And I wrote a song by myself. Are We Still Making Love was written about a marriage breakup of some friends. So we didn't share yet. We hadn't gotten that far. Wish that we had. Um, when that album came out and it was so well received by the critics and the press and all that, um, we planned to make another record, and we had songs for that, and we were just getting into the co-writing when he got sick and passed away. So yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of, most of those songs they were already existed, and he had been making demos and been trying to get another record deal. But he kind of Gene was, I never had a problem with Gene physically walking away from my situation. He never did. He walked away from most of the situations he was in. He'd get bored, and he would feel disenfranchised, or not given the credit for what he was doing. But we never had that. Luckily, he always seemed to like what I was doing, and he'd come and sing. Sometimes we'd do a show together. The Textones would do a rock show with his rock band, and sometime one time we played two shows at the Palomino in North Hollywood, and he came and sat in with us, and I'd take a break, and he'd sit in, and there's a videotape of that, which one of these days hopefully will surface. But um, yeah, all I can say is that if there had been more time, we probably would have written together. We would have written together.
It's very sad because I mean, I remember the first time I heard I think it's The Strength of Strings that he
Yeah,
wrote, and I'm like, how is this not like one of the most famous? I don't know. I just blown away by his songwriting
yeah.
and
I just listened to that recently in the
oh
car.
yeah,
We still have a CD player in the car, so we have an old car, and we played that just recently, and it's like you're going, God, unbelievable. Well, for me, Spanish guitar is one of the greatest songs that's ever been written
yeah.
for a Spanish guitar. And Bob Dylan even said, if I had a song that that I didn't write that I wished I had, it would be Spanish Guitar by Gene Clark. That's a heavy statement.
Yeah. Did he what aspect of like the music industry did he struggle with? Did he struggle with promotion or going out there, or what did he, as you said, he felt just disenfranchised?
Well, I'm gonna tell you a story which you probably heard, but the first Birds singles and album were when the songs came out, most of the singles, some of the singles were Bob Dylan songs that the Birds recorded, they covered and turned into their own in a way. You know, their rock, what we call folk rock. And when the money came in, um, because Gene was the writer with the most percentages of the songs, uh, the guys publishing checks, and they were young, they didn't know from anything, and they didn't really realize that if you wrote a song, that's where the money was, until you started selling records. But the the other members of the Birds, their portions of those publishing checks was about 1/5 to Gene's 4/5. And when they realized that, they started pushing to write more themselves. And Gene was pushed out. And he had his own demons. I mean, he didn't like to fly, you know, just had some bad experiences with that. And I can relate to that. You know, not flying, but other things that you have to overcome. But I think that was it. And he also, when he'd go into the studio, he would have a grand time, shall we say, and people would, you know, he'd have 4 background singers. I mean, you know, some of the no other is just like, my God, you know, between Jesse and Davis and all the, you know, background singers. I mean, those people, it wasn't that they were cost a lot of money. It's just that they would take forever to get whatever they were doing done. And I mean, compared to now, I mean, people would take 2 years to make an album, you know, or something even longer. But Gene wanted to, he had his grand ideas about the way things needed to be composed, much like a Brian Wilson, in that it's his vision, you know, and he wanted to capture his vision. So I think that was part of it. And I think also the record business was just, they were after the hit. They wanted a hit single. And some of Gene's albums just wasn't hit single stuff, you know. Could have been, like you said, Strength of Strings. I mean, I can remember She Don't Care About Time not being on an album, you know. And then you've got other songs like Set You Free This Time, and you look at the words of that and you just go, my God, who wrote this? It's like almost, it's like Shelley or something, you know. It's unbelievable.
And the song the Gypsy Rider song that you guys did together, I get that. I don't know what it is, but he has such a unique way of phrasing and shaping lyrics and words and melodies. And the same kind of thing. I just like, there's something when I hear it, it's so unique. It's like he has such a unique style and phrasing that it just kind of, I think it blows me away anytime I hear it.
Well, you know, Finn, Gene used to say to me all the time when we'd be sitting around, and like when he wrote the song Your Fire Burning, that was close to his eventual death, but he wrote that song and there was such beautiful lyrics to that. And the axiom that he brought to me was, never lose the chance when you're writing to be poetic. Always think of it that way, because you want it to last forever. You want people to read it in 100 years and go, wow, this is really beautiful poetry. And that was Gene. I mean, he really was that way. You can ask Chris Hillman. I mean, Gene never had a book with him, never had a book in his house, didn't read books. Where did it come from? None of us know.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of blows my mind to hear that, because yeah, you think of some of the other kind of poetic writers, something they're always engaged in literature and everything. So to have something like that is just, that's phenomenal. I want to ask you
Well, like
also
Van
about
Morrison, Van Morrison would say the same thing, but he's crediting, you know, I mean, in some of his songs, Yeats and Shelley, and I mean, that's just when they find their muse, sometimes they'll admit that was a muse. Gene never really alluded to the fact that there was another outside influence other than something that came from within, you know.
Whoa, that's incredible. Honestly, that, I mean, it's just I there's kind of there's one of there's lots of artists that kind of give me like a feeling, but I get like a chill when I hear any of Gene Clark's music. It's like a kind of like just this chill though. That only kind of a few people have, and I think it is the lyrics that you're talking about, the way that they um it's very haunting as well. It's kind of overpowering, like it really hits
Yeah.
me. Um, but I also want to ask you about, like, you seem to have this amazing ability with collaborations. Do you know where this um is it a skill that you picked up? Where did you pick it up? How did you manage to get so good at just
I
being able
don't
to
like to
collaborate with
play
anyone?
alone. I don't like to play alone. I'm not really, it's not that I'm not comfortable. I can get up on a table and dance, you know, I mean, I can, wherever. I'm just such a ham. I love performing for people, but playing alone is not the joy that you get from collaboration. You get this incredible, the synergy that comes between two people. It becomes, instead of I'm going to quote one of my friends, Tony Bronigal, a famous drummer, plays with Bonnie Raitt. Uh, and we were in the studio once, and he said, "Yeah, there needs to be another voice on this or another instrument." He said, "You know, it's okay to be a solo act, but why not have a conversation?" And that's why I feel like that having another, at least one person. I mean, I love playing in a band because then there's several conversations going on. But yeah, it's important to find where your strength is, and I think that's my strength is not playing alone.
I mean, I'm not gonna, I know the names, like the names of the people that you've worked with. I just like, I'm jealous as someone who plays music as a musician, you know, like
Oh, so
um,
is the older me. I'm thinking about, what was the most wonderful thing that happened? Being on stage at the Roxy with Mick Taylor. It doesn't get much better than that, as a guitar player.
so, I mean, that's an insight into as well. Did you think it was just all happening and then you just kind of roll with it and then you're not thinking about, oh, I'm doing music with this person or whatever. You're just making music as it comes.
Well, I think that you have to have some kind of a strategy of attracting those people that you want to play with. I mean, I had good management who saw the vision that I could do this. That I mean, I didn't always feel comfortable that I was like, oh, can I do that? And my manager Saul Davis, he was a huge Mick Taylor fan. I was a huge Mick Taylor fan with the Blues Breakers and eventually the Stones too. But as far as getting together with Mick was just, you know, well, long story short is I was asked to be in Bob Dylan's video, A Sweetheart Like You, by his road manager, who was a fan of my band, the Textones, and he called me and said, we need someone to pantomime Mick Taylor's guitar parts in this video for the album Infidels. The single is A Sweetheart Like You, and I said, well, I'm a huge Mick Taylor fan. I said, maybe I can do it, So they sent me a cassette, and I learned it on my lunch break one day. I was working a 9 to 5 on Sunset Boulevard and for a marketing firm, music marketing. And I went home, which was a few blocks away, and sat there and learned the guitar solo. And the last 32 seconds of Sweetheart Like You video, which was Bob's first video, he'd never done a lip sync. I was featured in that, and that brought me to the attention of Mick Taylor. And when he was in town with John Mayall, they played a show, and I went down with I went down actually with Eric Johnson to see him play. I introduced myself, and then a couple of years later, when they were doing Mick was playing with Bob Dylan on the road. He and Bob came to see me perform with the Textones at a club down in Santa Monica. And that's when he got in touch with me, and he says, if you'd like to do something, I'd love to play guitar on it. So that's how we met our connection. He was living in New York at the time. And we made that connection and did several projects together, and we did some short tours and that kind of stuff. So yeah, and of course I'm wishing that I keep waiting for Mick to do something different else. He's basically, I think he's maybe sort of not done, but just not finding anything inspirational. So, but yeah,
How do you how do
playing with
you
him was incredible. He was incredible, you know.
how do you sort of keep your own like I don't know, you keep your own center or something in that situation? Because I would certainly, trust your own musical intuition, your own knowledge as well, and when you're playing with someone that you admire or you know.
Well, you got to keep your head on. I mean, geez, it's like, yeah. I mean, you're standing there, you're pinching yourself, going, you know, I'm playing with my hero, you know, or even with Bob Dylan. I mean, he was very nice to me, so I didn't really. It wasn't like, you know, you were just another person on the stage. He was very um, personable, and Mick was the same way. I mean, Mick was just thrilled that he was being asked to do something that was, let's just say, I gave him the runway. We played songs that had very lengthy outros, lengthy solos. And I said, man, the canvas is yours. Go for it, you know, because I'm here to present you as one of the world's greatest guitar players. Go for it. And that, I think that pleased him, you know. So and he always liked my band. I had a good band and everybody was rocking and, you know, confident. And, you know, that was it. Like, you know, when you get on stage with somebody like a Gene Clark or a Mick Taylor, you know, it brings you up to that powerful level that they're on. It may only be fleeting, but you are up there for the moment and you have to, you sink or swim, you know. It's not like you can just go, I can't play tonight. No, it's like, no. There you go. You got to do it. So
Um, it's almost like an athlete like performance. You gotta raise your game on the night of the big performance.
yeah.
Um, or there's also so I'm a massive I'm a Deadhead for sure, so I'm a massive Grateful Dead fan. But there's in their documentary they talk about how they all kind of serve the music, and it sounds like to me that that was you definitely seem to serve the music or serve the whatever function I can play or role I can play here, I'm going to play it.
Well, you know, I feel like that the music serves me because
Uh,
I'm like this. I'm in the water and I'm waiting for the buoy to hold me up, and that's the music. Right now I'm working on an album that on my last album was came out like in the end of 2023. We were still in COVID and lockdown or whatever you want to call it, not lockdown, but certainly COVID. And I have been working on an album of songs with Pete Brown, the poet, British poet, who wrote lyrics for Cream and Jack Bruce and Procol Harum. And he and I got, well, I had produced, as a producer, I had produced two solo albums for Paul Jones from Manfred Mann. And it was 2006 and 2016. And in 2017, Paul still had his BBC radio show, which I'm not sure if you're familiar. It was on every Monday there in the UK. And we heard, we used to listen on our computer on Mondays because we loved who he would interview, and his songs too, he'd play. And once he had Pete Brown on, and Pete was on for a whole hour, and he was talking, sadly, he was talking about he had stopped writing because his writing partner had passed away from cancer, and the he had lyrics and stuff and nowhere to funnel that. And so we got in touch with him, and I said, you know, I'd love to write with you. You want to send me some lyrics? And in 2019, he started sending me lyrics. And then and I wrote a couple songs right away from that. And then I went on the road, was on the road with a partner, Todd Wolf, and I were touring Europe, Germany, and Austria, Sweden, and we were doing shows, acoustic blues. And we got home in January, and I went back into the studio and recorded one of the songs that we had written, that Pete and I had written together, and we were intending it for Paul Jones, and Paul was sort of, I don't know, he was in some other project at that point. And by March 15th, we were in full lockdown. So, but Pete kept sending me lyrics. And then in 2023, I had 7 sets of lyrics. And unfortunately, he passed away from cancer in May of 2023. But I have been recording them, re-recording them. At the time, I was recording them with an iPhone and my laptop. And my Texans bass player, he lives in Crouch End in London, and he's British. And he would record a drum track for me, bass track, keyboard, send it to me. I would sing into my iPhone with my laptop with the little headphones from Sony Walkman, and send it back to him, and he would mix it, and we would send it to Pete, who lived in Hastings. And Pete would go, yeah, I think I need to put another verse in that or whatever. Anyway, we ended up writing 7 songs together, but they were all done as demos, home demos. So I've spent the last year re-recording those songs with proper drums and other instruments, and playing on them with real guitars instead of, synth things. But that's what I've been working on. And the music literally lifts you. We've had a tough year, some tough things have happened, physical things in my family, and lost my brother during COVID, and just the things that as you grow older, you keep seeing all your friends going, everybody's going, sadly. But that has buoyed me, and that's what music does. And that's one thing about it, that it cheers people, it makes people feel alive again, and I will do this until I can't do it anymore. So
That's amazing. That's such a good. That's my motto as well. I love music.
fine motto. It might be my epitaph.
Can I ask you about your? I'm not. I don't know how. I don't know much about it, but I love the album of Roy Cooder with Ali Fakar Toure, I think is the name of it. I can't pronounce that sometimes. And I know that you worked alongside him as a translator.
Actually in an ad hoc. It was an ad hoc thing.
Okay.
He was playing in town at McCabe's, which is the venue that Gene and I recorded an album there, and we used to play there a bit. And it's an acoustic venue. It's a listening room in Los Angeles, Santa Monica, actually. And he was playing there, and I'm casual there. I walk in and out of that place, and they're very sweet about it. And we walked into the dressing room, and he was sitting there with 2 journalists. One, I think, was from the magazine. The other was from one of the newspapers. And they didn't speak French, and he didn't speak English. And I had very limited French as a teenager, but I was helping to, get what they needed, the information that they needed from him. And he was he was a little guarded, I mean, very, very wondering who in the heck is this crazy blonde woman, But yeah, that was it. It was basically that. And somehow slipped into my bio, and it's now, people are like, no, it was a footnote in my life.
Well, it's just I'm fascinated because that's like, I love that album that they did together, and I'm just like, any insight into it, I'm kind of like I'd be clawing at, because
the album that we got turned on to, though, was the album that was his first U.S. release. So that was where we were. That's why we were at the show, because this was before Rye got involved, where I was, obviously well into him anyway. But yeah, and we were big fans anyway. So yeah,
it's like a fascinating. I mean, I don't know. I said before I was jealous, but even just thinking of the kind of paths that you cross, and the work that you've done, it's phenomenal. And I know that now you're into more of the. I know you're still writing, but you're producing as well, as you said. And what do you think it's? How do you switch from making music, so from being in the kind of writing mode to then actually producing something? And do you have to change the way you're looking at it, or do you incorporate it all together?
Well, I think that you have to utilize the time you've spent behind the glass, as they would say, um, to be empathetic ears for the person that's now behind the glass, and you have to maybe be uh, their advocate, because they're sometimes not their own advocate when they're performing it. Your vulnerabilities are strong, and you're having doubts of, am I doing this right? We all have that, a little bit of that, but I think that as a producer, I think I have that to offer, is that I have the experience behind the recording glass, and have been able to help people. A lot of people just don't know what their strengths are, especially young people that are just starting out, or maybe they haven't recorded before. And I always try to say, well, if you're going to hire me, let me help you. If you don't, if you are in doubt that you can do something, then we'll try it and we'll see if you can do it. Sometimes you can do a lot of things. You become superhuman when you're performing, and it's a bit like any kind of whatever you're doing. You get your adrenaline sort of takes over, and you become this superhuman. So, but I think that what I enjoy about producing is that, to be able to say to someone, they think, oh, maybe my voice cracked there or whatever, and you have to bring it into their head that people want to see your vulnerabilities. That's what attracts people to musicians, artists, actors. That's something that I think that very often performers, musicians, we're always the one to count ourselves out. You have to. I mean, I've always felt like that was something that I could bring to the table, which helped them. And I'm hoping that's been the truth. I'm hoping that every person that I've recorded, when they're done, they want to record with me again. You know, yeah.
That's another great. You've nailed two great mottos. That's another. That's a great production motto. Like, yeah, for sure. You want to make the person feel like, yeah. So just the last like couple of questions, and then we can
Sure, you
wrap it
bet.
up. Um, just wondering what you think about the kind of state of the union, no, state of like music, or that kind of lyrical content, like especially when you're talking about Gene and the way that he wrote, and you've worked with obviously Bob Dylan and so many like incredible, and then yourself, obviously what you're making, the kind of music that you make. Do you feel like there's a sort of drought maybe, or are we lacking that kind of content of lyrics, or um sort of uplifting
Well,
of the soul?
as far as being topical, you mean, as it being
Yeah,
contemporary and
topical,
topical.
or yeah, topical, as of right now. Like for me anyway, I feel like there's a lack of it. I'm just wondering what you think.
Well, I was a bit involved in that scene in the mid '80s, because we had a tremendous um, lack of jobs in America at that point. 1984 was some sad times for people that were living on the street, and I wrote a song called with Barry Goldberg, who just passed away this past January. He and I were uh, songwriting partners, and he was in the band Electric Flag, and he was also played with Dylan at Newport. He played organ with Dylan. Barry and I wrote a song called Midnight Mission, which was my lyrics and his music, and it was about people downtown living on the street. And we felt this tremendous uh, need for the spotlight to be shined on this, because it was sort of going under the radar, falling under the radar. And so we tended. I wrote several songs in that period that were like that. I wrote a song actually that I had never lyrics I had never recorded with anybody, And then Alan Clark from the Hollies and I wrote this song together called It Makes Me Cry. And that's the same, it's the same sentiment. It's about people on the streets, people living in tents, and it's a world that you don't as a child you don't realize it exists until you're suddenly you're in your 20s, and suddenly you realize that it's just not fair to everyone. The world's not a fair place, and that we have to shine that light when we can, when we have the microphone and we have the podium, the stage. You have to shine the light for other people that are not seeing that. So yeah, that's the
Um,
way I feel. Mhm.
and do you feel like with the way that the music is going, especially with we have AI now as well, do you feel like that
A what? A
AI
what? A what?
uh, that
Go.
could there be a return maybe back to like it being almost more important to hear people's, to have less production, less sort of flash, and bit more like the kind of focus on the person, what they have to say, their own individual voice?
I do, but things are secular. I mean, we do have music goes in and out of fashion, and what I would say is technology goes in and out of fashion, and it becomes too processed, too perfected. And I'm in the producers and engineers uh, guild, if you want to call it guild, uh, in the national recording artists, and we go through this all the time. That you just keep saying, I don't record that way. I don't want to record that way. Maybe it's useful for people that don't know how to do things the long way, out of the box. You don't, I mean, what do we end up going back to was after all the uh, digital the digital age, music became unattractive, literally, to us older people's ears. And that could be because the sound waves for analog music are rolling. Digital waves are jagged. And our ears don't like that. Our ears don't like jagged music. It's physically painful for people of my generation. I'm 73, so that doesn't that sound doesn't appeal to me, and I'm constantly trying to go back to that warm sound, and it came back. I mean, there were there's quite a few people that are recording analog, and they're recording less is more. And I mean, that's, if you can tell it with a voice and a guitar, or two voices and two guitars, why not tell it that way? Why not play it that way? Why not sing it that way? I mean, it's great to throw the kitchen sink in there if you feel that's what you got to do, but I don't feel that's what I got to do. I also like to build, when I'm recording other people, I like to build a mix. I like to make a statement, then make another slightly different statement, so the ear is engaged and continues to want to be engaged. And then when you get to after, let's say, whatever your peak moment in the song is, you got to bring it down, because you need to get somebody, you need to go, okay, that's where we were going, and now we're going to close it out. That's my production tip. Is if I were going to say to somebody, try that. Doesn't always work, but that's kind of what I think, that the ear wants to be treated as in, wow, that's cool. And it also needs to rest, so that when you come back in, it is it's pricked up. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, that makes sense. Yeah, you don't want it like a brick wall, like of just noise. You
Yeah.
want there
Sometimes
being
noise is good.
no, sometimes noise is good, but it's like anything in excess, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it's I don't know. I feel like I'm only 27, but I feel like I'm an old man, so that's why my ears may be the same, even though I'm younger.
Yeah.
Because it has the same effect on me. I need something that like engages me, or brings me in or has some sort of content to it, and it's not
Yeah.
just sort of noise and then just sort of also human noise, just words just kind of being vomited out without much substance. So I think
Although I have to say, one of my favorite bands from not that recent, but the Vaccines. I mean, they came to LA and we went to hear them in at the Troubadour, which is kind of an old school place. That's a Linda Ronstadt Eagles kind of place, Birds and that kind of thing. And they were playing, and they did 50 minutes of songs that were all about 2.5 minutes each, and it was just, you know, it was sort of like the Ramones of now, you know, and it was wonderful, you know. And when they were done, they said, "See ya, we're out of here. No encores. Bye." You know,
no,
and we're going, "Great."
no, that could be great as well. I mean,
It can be great as well. Exactly.
it's all about how like people do it and how it works and everything. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
but yeah. Okay, we'll stop the recording there. That
All
was
right.
fantastic.
Okay.